So, welcome to the first ever Brewster Baseball Association Trade Analysis Podcast. I'm Ted Schmidt. I run the California Crusaders, although I'm sure you're all sick of me by now and know that. And then Tyler Simmons with Jacksonville Hurricanes will be joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ted.
Oh, well, thank you for being here. That doesn't sound artificial at all. So, before we get started, I wanted to talk about things. We'll do this the same way that we did in the articles I used to write. We'll kind of go through players one by one, give the rationale for what we thought maybe the move was, how we think it went, or will work out, and then give some grades. And what I'm going to be doing going forward here is I'm going to be keeping kind of an Excel spreadsheet scorecard and give some average numbers and how many trades people make. And again, the thing to be remembered with the trades is the grades is that they're really arbitrary. And I've gone back and looked at them and said, what was I thinking? So hopefully with our running sheet, though, that kind of randomness will fade out there. The other thing is at the end of this, there's going to be timestamps for when we talk about each trade. So if someone wants to listen to it again, they can just jump to the part that they wanted to hear. And then later, we're going to start on the trade that we started to do this a while ago. So we're going to miss some of the newer stuff. Maybe I'll try to get those in a future edition. But we're going to start on the Charm City and Jacksonville trade, which makes it fortunate that Tyler's here on that's dated Thursday, January 5th, and then work backwards. If I skip one, it's because it's small, and we'll get back to that at a later moment to talk about. So I guess with that being said, we can get going. So it is nice that you're here for these because the first couple trades involve you. You traded to Charm City a while back. You traded a starting pitcher prospect, Brett Hugel, and you traded Mark Totten, acquiring Brett Hugel as a prospect. I don't know, kind of my thoughts on that were, Hugel looks, or Bert, not Brett, sorry. Well, he's got a great name, Bert Hugel. He's an almost 22 prospect, 2-year-old prospect. He's a little bit behind in his development for what you would like for that age. But he's got a good 3-pitch mix. Doesn't have a lot of, doesn't look like he'll have a bad split with those. The cutter and the splitter should help him get righties out. Get some ground balls. Not a great ground ball percentage, but he does get some. And I thought he looks like a guy that could kind of develop into like maybe a 3, probably a 4, but at least looks like somebody who could someday be a starter if he develops. His age is a little bit of a question mark. I don't know what you thought about him in general, but.
Yeah, so, I picked up Totten in the offseason for cheap, and obviously I've been trying to rebuild through trades because my drafts have been terrible. And when I looked at Bird, it was basically just what you said. He's behind in his development, so he's not that valuable, but neither is Totten. Not going to be able to get a lot for a guy with his ratings either as a right-hander. What I do like about Bird is the cutter. So He's a lefty. It's always nice to have left-handers, and then that cutter will help him out against righties if he develops too. So
right, and he could play up, like you said. If he played, the being a lefty 7-7-8, I think is OTP's lefty preference is probably a little out of control. And being a righty 7-7-8, you think back end starter. A lefty 7-7-8 could be a number 3. So I do like the cutter. I agree with you. It's one of the cutter and the sinker are probably 2 of my favorite pitches in OTP, and so I like him. And I agree with your assessment of Totten. I don't like Totten. I'll admit. I think you made out well in this trade. I wouldn't have traded much of anything for him because he's got a terrible track record. He should be better than this. He's got a very good fastball. He gets ground balls. He should be an acceptable starter, but at most of his spots, he's been really not great. He's got a career FIP that's about 4.5, and he's not making much. So this is a decent move for Charm City if they're going to try to compete this year. But I really didn't like it tremendously for him. I actually, as far as grades go, and the same thing with grades normally, I give like an organizational grade and then a talent grade. But with the talent, I called kind of Hugel kind of a C+. I gave you a B+ organizational grade for it because I thought it was a good move for you. I especially like the fact that you're skeptical about your success this year. Like, that's, I don't know. Some people will say, hey, you got a chance at the playoffs, you should be all in. Getting in the playoffs is the big thing. But I thought it was a great move from that standpoint of looking to rebuild the club that, while you're winning, needs rebuilding. From Charm City's grade standpoint, I gave them a C minus because I just don't like Totten. Although he's pitched well for them, I've never liked him. And I gave him a D plus organizationally, and that may be a little bit harsh, but I just, they're not, even if they're competing this year. Why trade a prospect for a questionable starter that's not going to make a huge impact? And I don't know, maybe I'm being a jerk.
I probably would have gone a little bit higher on the talent just because the nice thing about Totten is he does play up as a reliever too with that strong fastball. So
right.
They are going to get, I think, better production even if he starts to tank as a starter. He should be a good reliever, which is what he was doing for me. But it's just a classic talent now for hopefully talent later move. I mean, it really wasn't a huge move, I don't think, on either part. So I think it was kind of a C down the middle, and then maybe a little bit of a B minus or so for me organizationally because I add a little bit of pitching depth.
And maybe I'm being harsh on Charm City there. And honestly, Todd's pitched well for them, and they're in the playoff race, so what do I know anyway? The grades are all done with the mindset of, just for people listening, the grades are all done with the mindset of what it looks like at the time of the trade. There's no how it worked out part of it, because we can all do that. I go back at these trades all the time and go, well, I was completely wrong. I did a podcast with Adam a while back about that, and it was amazing how often everybody was just completely wrong, especially the ones where they're just ripping people for getting destroyed. So,
Well, it's like whose line is it anyway? The points don't matter, and we're obviously going to grade based on favoritism. So.
Right, and I'm the guy doing this because I wrote a bunch of articles because I realized it was a good way to get participation points, huge chunks of them. That's why I started doing it. And not like I'm some special. I'm actually one of the hardest people to trade with because I overvalue my own prospects, and I'm sure it drives everybody nuts. So it's not like I'm some amazing trade guru. But let's move on then to your next one, because you've made the last two trades here at this point in the season. You also sent Sebastian Durant to, and this is another one where you're like, I'm not buying my success, so let's send out a reliever I can get something for and try to rebuild a little bit. So you sent Sebastian Durant to Las Vegas for Andre Georges. And Durant, he's a solid relief pitcher. He's over his career been considerably better against righties than he is against lefties. I didn't write it down, so maybe I'll look that up while you're giving your thoughts on this. But his stats back that up. It's not just the splits that he has on his ratings, but if you look at his performance against both over his career, it's not that his performance against lefties is bad, it's just not nearly as good, which kind of puts him, for me, in the very good middle reliever, but not somebody you really want to count on to shut the door on people range. And so maybe he's a little pricey for that, but $2.5 million is not too bad. And then he'll be, I think he's got an option for next year. Yeah, a team option of 2.9. So if he plays well, that's reasonable. You picked up another kind of okay pitching prospect in Georges, who I called at the time. I think he's actually bumped since you got him, but we'll ignore that because I think he was 7.78 when you picked him up. And another righty with a cutter and a change, which will help him against lefties, and that slider will help him against righties. So he's got a good pitch mix. And another guy he's almost 21. He's pretty solid development track for 21. The control's a little behind, but that's not uncommon. And he actually, with the change, I think at the time had a positive split versus lefties with the cutter and the change, which is always kind of fun when you see that in a right-handed pitcher. And I again put the ceiling on him as kind of a back-end starter. If that change doesn't develop, then he might be stuck being a reliever, and that is a question when he's got this change that's only 3 out of 7 and everything else is nearly developed. I thought looking at this trade, this was kind of Rec had all those bullpen injuries. This was a reactionary move on his part, and he does that. And usually reactionary moves are bad, but Rec gets away with it. He just does it year after year where he just trades for deficits, and it seems like he's making small overpays, which is what I would call this. I kind of gave this grades of C's for everything, down the road C. I gave you a little bit better organizational grade because I liked the fact that you were again, I don't believe that winning I can get something for a reliever. I can get a decent prospect for a reliever. And that's always, if you're rebuilding, if you can get anything for a mid reliever to set up, that's a great move. So I don't know what you.
Yeah, with this trade, it's one of the rare times where I think I've come out ahead against Matt in a trade. Usually he rakes me over the coals. Yeah, I think it was a reactionary move too. He was going through a bunch of injuries. You know, Durand at the time was pitching lights out. I think he'd given up one earned run in a year, a full calendar year playing with me. So he had been really pitching lights out. So I was able to sell that. Obviously, Matt's not going to believe that, but he's been a pretty good reliever for the rest of his career. And at the time, Georges being 7.78 didn't quite look as good as he did. I don't think his velocity was as high either. So that kind of, he balked at it at first, but I just kind of, you know, I held my ground on that one.
You're like, I got wrecked and old. I got him.
So that's not going to happen very often. That's kind of nice. The other thing that I really like about Georges is his high work ethic. I don't really think it matters much with development, but it really helps in the clubhouse. That seems to be one thing, you know, that submarines a season when you have a bunch of guys that have low work ethic, and that's what the players bitch about all the time if you're not doing very well. So hoping that he'll be a fourth starter, and that's kind of where I predict him to be a solid number 4. If that velocity keeps improving, at the very least, he looks like a good reliever candidate. You know, convert that changeup and add a little bit of velocity, and he could be possibly even a closer.
Yeah, no, that's true. If it doesn't work out with the velocity bumps, you're right. I mean, I didn't really think about that. I was looking at those 7.78, thinking he might jump to middle reliever status, but yeah, with the velocity up, and if that change doesn't work out, you're right. I mean, setup or closer is possible. So it's a solid move for you. I liked it. I think the next one on the list we were going to talk about was I think you were going to maybe take the lead on this one, was the Rupert Grant deal, the Madison Phoenix.
Yeah, let me take a look at that. So we've got Phoenix and Madison pulling out a trade, and Chris obviously had a little bit of a down year and was really, I think, was selling low on Rupert. You know, Rupert Grant is a right-handed power hitter that has a ton of power. What is this? He's going to be going for a second 30 home run season. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, he's got a lot of power, but he is a right-hander, so that's going to downgrade him in any kind of trade. You see nobody getting any kind of value for righty power, which is in first baseman.
And Kyle would jump in here and be like, and rightly so, because no one should ever give anything for right-handers because they're all terrible. But
he is the guy that's hit 30 home runs twice now and almost hit 40 previously. So he does have some talent. He's got some value. And I don't really think he got much of anything in return. You got a catcher, Alan McHugh, that is 26 and is only a 5 contact right now, 5 power.
Right.
He's got some potential, but at 26 and really 26 and a half, he doesn't look like he'll be able to realize any of that potential. So he looks kind of like a quad A backup catcher. And then relief pitcher Alexander Thomas, who's also 26, just turned 26, and has good potential ratings, but is still horribly underdeveloped too. He's just a 6'8", so it looks like you got 2 guys that really don't have much of a chance at making the major leagues or making any kind of an impact at the major leagues. So it was kind of a sell low on Madison's part and, you know, get a really cheap power first baseman for Phoenix. You know, Grant's 26, so he's going to be in the organization for a long time. You'd think he's under team control for another 3 years. So yeah, it's kind of a win-win for Phoenix. And, you know, I think Chris was really kind of down on Rupert at the time. He was able to get something for a guy that you weren't really planning on, maybe given arbitration payday too. So.
And I agree with pretty much everything you said there. I mean, in 2027, Rupert Grant was 216, 272, 392. And then this year so far, he's been 221, 270, 441, just looking at his page right now. But last year, the guy had an 850 OPS and hit 38 home runs, and he hit 28 home runs the year before that. And since going to Phoenix, he tore it up. So I don't know if this is just Chris getting destroyed by small sample size. He had been trying to move Grant forever, and he has Rhodes, who he's not going to move. Rhodes has, won a batting title. He's a great player, and he had to get John Mick into the lineup. So, like, I get him wanting to move it, but I just think I think he just got frustrated and sold low. And I'm an idiot because I need a first baseman, and I could have had freaking Rupert Grant, and Chris could have had more for it. This is just dumb. I actually, the grades I gave on the, I don't know, did you pick out any grades for this at all, or?
Oh, no, I didn't really have a chance. I mean, when I look at it, I would say for Madison, organizational grade, I would really rate it probably D plus because
that's what I gave
one
him.
26-year-old for two other 26-year-olds, so you're not getting any younger. And talent wise, oh my gosh, D minus probably.
I wasn't that rough. I gave him a D plus.
I mean, you're trading away a major league first baseman for two guys that might be bench bats
right.
A middle reliever, long reliever type. So, there is a chance that they develop. So there is a chance that he gets something out of it. But I really think it was, you got a guy that you're trying to trade and he's not performing. He just gets so frustrated that you want to get rid of him. So anytime you get anything at all, you jump at it. And Rupert's going to be a guy that's probably going to be frustrating with that high strikeout total. So he's going to strike out 180 times a year and have a low BABIP sometimes and have a higher one a few other times. And it's really going to matter how many home runs he hits. If he hits 35 home runs, he looks like a great player. If he hits 20 home runs, he's going to look like he should be sent down to AAA. So he's going to be a guy that's probably going to be frustrating for Phoenix going down the road too.
No, that's very true. And the other thing about him, the interesting thing though is if you look at Mick compared to the guy he was moved so he could play, they've got the same contact and power. They're both right-handers. Mick has better gap power. He's got a little bit better eye. I think he's like a 7, and his avoid strikeouts is like a 7 or 8. So it's not that Mick's not a better player, but they're not that different. They're so.
He's a different type of player.
Yeah.
I really used to discount avoid K and really look at I a lot, but I've kind of come around a little bit on the avoid K with just having consistency. Like if that guy is just consistently making contact, he seems like he's somebody that you can count on more.
Right. No, I'm with you on that too. I think it's one of the things we're all learning, or maybe the way the rating's being used has changed or something. I don't know, but you're not the only person I know who said those kind of exact same things. I think what we're going to do, the next one we're going to look at is, because I know you've got to get going before too much longer, so I'm going to run through. Actually, you want to do your next two, and maybe we can get those done and get out of here?
Yeah, let's. I'll talk about the Joyride trade.
Okay.
So we had Hawaii, who is in the middle of a rebuilding season, trading away their former first-round pick, center fielder at the time, Captain Joyride, to Matt at Las Vegas for a couple of prospects. Joyride was somebody that had been drafted extremely high and didn't sign in one of those poor draft classes and then drafted at the end of the first round the next year and has really kind of developed into just about what he was expected to be as a first-round pick. So that's kind of the rare occasion where the guy fills out his ratings just about perfectly. He's a big-time doubles hitter. He'll have decent contact, decent eye, have maybe enough range to play center field as a backup, but really he is a left fielder. He should be playing left field where he'll be good defensively, and that's where Matt's been playing him primarily when he has the chance to.
I think, not to interrupt you briefly, but I think one of the problems with him is he's 26 and his defensive, he hasn't been playing in the field. I think Matt recently sent him back down to the minors just to get him left, so he could get some left field experience built up so he could put him in the lineup and not have him be a horrible defensive mess.
Yeah, and he'll be bad. It's kind of like me with Franklin Pierce. Learning right field is just terrible at the beginning of the year.
Right.
So you kind of have to go through those struggles. But I think for Matt, he'll be an okay left fielder going forward.
Oh, yeah.
If he is able to play there. He's not going to be a masher. He's not going to hit 300 every season. But he's a guy that you can stick out there and know you get good defense and some doubles.
Yep.
So he'll be a decent player. And then coming back to Hawaii, Hawaii kind of got some odd prospects, I would say. They got a starting pitcher, Brian Roman, who's a 23-year-old, I don't know what he was at the time now. He's fully developed now, and it looks like he was pretty much fully developed then. He was gained a point of stuff since the trade. But he's not really a starting pitcher. He's got 3 stamina, and I know at one point I talked about on the forums how I thought 3 stamina could be a starter, and he can, but that's not really what you're wanting a 6-7-7 pitcher to have.
They've got to be really good. Like they've got to be
a really good pitcher to be a 3 stamina starting pitcher. So he looks like a guy that's going to be a reliever, and at that he'll be just a typical middle reliever, 7-7-7 righty. He does have a cutter and a sinker.
I don't even know that he's a reliever, man. I called him AAA filler.
Well, that's true. He could be like your long reliever type guy that just is your last bullpen arm. Is kind of his ceiling, it looks like. And then he also got Chris Drover, who Matt has been trying to offload for it seems like the entire time that I've been in the league. He's a starting pitcher that was a first-round pick. He's 29 now. He was 29 at the time of the trade. So it's not like Mike got a young guy back. You kind of know what Chris is. He's a 4th, 5th starting pitcher. He doesn't have a lot of stamina, so he's not going to eat a lot of innings. He's got average fastball, average curveball, average changeup. He's, just kind of okay. And he really has been not even that for Hawaii this season, but that's kind of what it looked like he was getting. So I didn't really get this trade
I don't either.
at the time because Hawaii went into the season knowing, Mike knew that he was going to be rebuilding. So I don't, organizationally, I felt like this was a pretty poor decision on his part, mainly because I don't think that Roman is a starting pitcher. Now, if Roman was a 6-7-7 or a 7-7-7 starting pitcher, then I could kind of see that you're looking for a future pitching depth and hoping to get a bump. But to hope that you get 2 bumps is really kind of stretching.
And he's 23. It's not like he's young.
Young major leaguer under team control for 5 seasons. Like, that's the type of guy that you want as a rebuilding team. Even if he's not very good, he's cheap. And you just throw him out there and you get average production while you try to get those minor leaguers coming up through. So I didn't really get it, organizationally for Hawaii. I said it would be like a D+, C- maybe. He was only giving away one guy that's not, franchise changing or anything, but in talent wise, currently I would put it as a C-. Chris Drover is somebody that could come in and at least fill a roster spot in Joyride's place. So, he wasn't, he was getting a roster spot for a roster spot. Not really a lot of talent.
Right. It just doesn't make the sense for a team that's rebuilding. Like, I just don't get it. Like, I mean, even if Mike decided to tear it apart, I agree with you. I don't really get it.
And I thought it was a great trade for Matt. He gets a major leaguer to replace who was it that left? That was his left fielder, Benuelos.
Yeah.
So he gets a young left fielder under team control that's got another year, possibly at $500,000 league minimum. I thought it was a great trade for him. I would say, C+, B- organizationally, and talent wise, again, like a B- talent. He's got a solid left fielder for 5 more years.
Yeah. Well, we might have disagreed on like half letter grades, but pretty much I've got the exact same stuff. So I think the next trade we're going to try to do, and I know you got to get going. Do you mind if you run over a little bit? Because I don't think we can get through this in 8 minutes.
No, I'll try to get through the start of it here.
Okay, so the next one we're going to look at, we're going way out of order on this, but we wanted to get it. There are a bunch of kind of ho-hum deals in this group of stuff we were looking at. So we wanted to get one big one in here that everybody's already kind of weighed in on, but it's just such a, frankly, we've all decided bad deal that it's worth talking about. Well, I guess great for one team, but this is the Hinson deal, like the Hinson Contos deal, Vancouver Halifax, which we all felt bad, or both Tyler and I felt bad because we both thought we were going to rake Messick just over the coals. But now Russell just gets to look back at this and go, yeah, that was horrible. So, um, I'll set you up a little bit here, but this was Halifax getting DH really, although he can't play first base, Stelio Cantos, who, I mean, he comes up with a great theme song, so that is something. And then 33-year-old right fielder Jorge Martinez, center fielder Frank Thomas, and two prospects in Lewis Hall and Pedro Gomez, and sending out Elroy Hinson, right fielder Mark Sturdivant, and Frenchie Cordova. I think he's Frenchie, right, Peter?
Yep,
Frenchie Cordova, center fielder. So, I don't know. Start where you want to, man, but this thing's a mess.
Well, I really don't know what Tim was doing with the trade. I could see, I like Cantos a lot. I had talked with Vancouver quite a bit about Cantos and how much I liked him. Obviously, never really having anything to trade for him and having my own first baseman. But I really like he's a lefty bat that has the power and the contact to be, 35 home run, 300 plus hitter every year. I like him, but he's a first baseman.
Right, his values, and he's not even a good first baseman. Like, you would probably not even want to be playing him at
really
first.
A DH. Yeah, sure, he's really a DH. And, at the time, Tim was wanting to blow it up as far as trading guys that were problem childs and people that were problems in the clubhouse, and that made a lot of sense. If you're going to be bad, you might as well have a good atmosphere and potentially get extra production out of guys because they're happy. But then you go around and you trade away probably the best captain in the entire league. Hinson is just phenomenal in the clubhouse and is the perfect leader, the guy anybody would want. And on top of that, he's also, up until this year, the best catcher in the league. So,
right.
He's got great defense. He hits. He's got a little bit of power. I mean, he's just what you would want as a catcher. He's signed to a reasonable contract for his production, too, for the next 3 years. So there's really nothing that screamed, get rid of this guy and, give up what he gave up. And I could see, like, okay, you got Cantos for Hinson, and then, maybe take it, you got the other prospects. Hall's a decent pitching prospect that could be really good. And then, Gomez at the time looked like he was going to be a potential big league third baseman. He's kind of lumped since then. So I could kind of see Cantos and Hall and Gomez for Hinson and maybe even Frenchie. Like, I could kind of see that. But then you throw in Sturdivant, who is really a phenomenal righty, young outfielder, and Martinez, who's old and expensive and signed till the end of time. Like,
right, and that's where this went off the rails, right? There. Like, he didn't get younger. Like, the only reason to move a guy like Hinson would be you're saying, I'm blowing it up, I'm going to get value in return for him. Okay, I get that. And it's interesting to hear your thoughts. I don't like Sturdivant. I just don't. Like, he's a 7.87 right-handed bat. I've seen these guys be tremendously inconsistent year to year. Sometimes they're just useless, but he's been good so far. So maybe I'm just an idiot and I'm wrong about him.
Well,
but he's definitely
he's a righty, but he does have 7.87 against righties is a solid. Isn't great. That's not going to get him a whole lot, but he is 8.97 against lefties, so he's going to crush lefties. Usually, he's not this year. He's crushing righties for some reason, but usually you'd think that guy is going to be okay against righties, and when he plays against the lefty, he's going to kill it. And he's not going to be multiple-time All-Star. He's not going to be a 5-time All-Star, but he's going to be somebody that's going to get an All-Star game here and there. He's going to really be your starting right fielder for probably 5 to 7 years. I mean,
right.
Sure, he's not great, but to lose that guy in exchange for
like Martinez, who's owed $37 million and is terrible. Like, so, what? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It's just not a good trade at all. And I tried to be nice in the forums because I've been on that type of a trade where you're just getting killed and everybody hates it. And nobody can see the same thing that you can see. So I was trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. But as the trade just keeps going on, and you look at the production and what he got, it's just hard not to get on here and say how bad it was. It was just a terrible, terrible deal all the way around. For for Tim. Or
Right.
the other side, it's a great trade.
Oh, and I hate it. Screw Brett for this trade. Just
players.
oh.
So
This when I saw this, I was this close to just starting punching myself in the junk. Like, just I hate it so much. Like, watching, oh my gosh, how much better Vancouver got. You know, Frenchie's a great center fielder. He's developed. He just got a free developed great center fielder. Like, and
right.
Thomas.
Yeah, in exchange for Thomas, who, you know, he picked up on a freaking flyer who had been terrible, and he paid him $4 million a year, and the guy comes out and is amazing his first year in Vancouver. And you're like, what? And then he's good his second year in Vancouver.
Right.
And then he trades him away, and he tanks.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he gets a free upgrade over Thomas. Plus, he gets the best catcher in the league and a good right fielder, and gets out of a $30+ million contract.
Right.
Yeah, so.
And if you take, I think if you take Jorge Martinez out of this, and if you take Cordova out of this, or you take Sturdivant, I think then that's the deal that's okay. Like, if Halifax doesn't take on Martinez's contract, and they don't give up one of those young guys,
or even if you don't give up the two young guys and you take on the contract,
right?
If Vancouver's like, well, we got to get rid of a contract to take on that contract. Well, you can take, you know, Martinez, and he can play at least for a couple of years because you're not trying to win anyway. But to then also give up your young center fielder and your young right fielder, you just kind of tank yourself, shoot yourself in the foot on your rebuild.
Right. And for question marks, I mean, that's the thing, is that Hall and Gomez looked like they could play, but we've already seen Gomez lump. They're young. They're not developed. Yeah.
Yeah,
so.
and I commented in the forums too recently that, you know, Hall could be being ruined. I mean, he's not ready for the majors, and he's playing in the major leagues right now and just getting crushed.
Yeah. That's like a topic for a totally different day when you bring guys up. I'm actually one of the guys who, if they're getting creamed, I'll put them back down, but I will push people a little bit before I think they're ready. But if he's getting creamed, he probably needs to go back to AAA.
More time.
But
my grades, I think it's pretty clear. It looks, you know, talent is probably a C+ because of Contos for Halifax. Sorry, Halifax's organization or talent grade was probably a C+ because Contos can hit. Yeah, he can hit. Hall could be a good pitcher, so that probably helps their organizational grade. I would maybe say D-, just because Hall could be okay and Contos could be okay. Other way around, it's just I would say an A straight across the board.
I actually gave him A+. I don't even know if that's a real grade or not, but yeah, and it hurts my soul to give Brett good grades. And like, this is, it's just, it's in the 6 or 7 years, well, 10 seasons I've been in this league now, it's one of the worst deals I've ever seen. It just screams bad. And I don't think this is one of those ones that's going to change. Were you around when Mike Swanson got traded?
No.
Because that got destroyed, and it turns out that we were all wrong, because Swanson just went into the toilet. Like, he was 31 years old, had 4 Steve Nebraskas, he was at the top of his game, and he fell. He don't even know he was 31. He might have been 29 or 30, and he fell apart. That's one of those guys with that sinker that just, like, the sinker starts to fall apart. Right.
The stuff goes down, and all of a sudden that just tanks everything.
Right. But I can't even see that even possibly happening in this deal. Like, there's no...
Because those guys are 24.
Right, there's no way that can happen. Well, I know you got to get going. I appreciate you taking time to squeeze this in today. Everybody's going to be stuck just listening to me for the rest of the way out. But because we got a few, I'm going to try to get through a few more of these, and then maybe we'll do another episode. Or it's not. If you want to do another one, I'd love to have you back. But there can always be other people. But I appreciate you coming in. That's Tyler Simmons there with his thoughts on some of those deals. Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks for having me. I had a lot of fun. Probably have a lot more fun than anybody else listening to it. So thanks for having me. Send me a PM if you want to set up another time.
Okay, cool. Sounds good, man.
All right, talk to you later.
Later. So that's, we've gotten through a few there. There's about 4 or 5 more trades I'd like to talk about if you're at all still interested in listening. I think this has been about a million ums and clickings and me taking a deep breath, and I'm not nearly getting through enough of this scotch. But that's okay. We'll keep going. So we're jumping back a little bit now, and this will be the Halifax Seattle deal that was, gosh, like around. Sorry, I'm trying to find the date. I've gotten all out of order here, so I'm actually a little bit of trouble finding the trade because I've clicked so many buttons I don't know what page I'm on anymore. Give me 1 or 2 seconds here to figure this out. But essentially, this is the deal where Halifax and Seattle traded 2 underachieving lefties in first baseman Jesus Gonzalez for relief pitcher Jose Perucho. And it was really just these guys have both kind of stunk up the joint for us. Let's see what happens if we swap them, which wasn't a terrible idea. Halifax needed another first baseman, or DH. They had kind of an open spot between Contos and being a DH and not having a first baseman. Seattle had, oh, there it is, finally found it. Seattle's the other way around. Seattle has Mustache Escobar. They're never, he's essentially worth about 17 first basemen right now the way he's playing. And while Jesus Gonzalez had a couple good years with them, overall he kind of underachieved. And then Perucho had been stinking up the joints in Halifax, and he was one of those guys that needed to leave. This was they had a bad clubhouse, and he is well known. Teammates have complained about him in team news multiple times. But, he's a 10-7-6 lefty reliever. He should be relatively decent. Great fastball, good slider. But he's just never really put that together. Well, shouldn't really say never, because now that I look at him, I'm getting this a little bit wrong. Now I remember, I thought he was bad, and I looked at this again. He's got a career FIP in like the 3.5 range. It's just that this year he wasn't playing well. And in 2027, his ERA was 4.94. This year was 4.22. And he's never really pitched quite as well as you'd expect. But again, with those bad clubhouses and a losing team, and frankly, Halifax really hasn't put much of a defense in the field for a while, it's not surprising to see him kind of underachieving. However, he does have he's got 2 years of ARB left. He's making about making $3 million. So if he pitches well, he could be a reasonable buy. And again, his career FIP minus is 85, so that's not too bad. If he works out, Seattle need relief pitching, so if he works out for them, it's not a bad move for giving up, Jesus Gonzalez, who they just didn't even have a spot on the team for. He also is kind of a little bit of a head case, not to the degree that Perucho is, but not a great personality, and he's been kind of up and down. I think it was a couple seasons ago. Let me see if I can find this. Back in 2027, 807 OPS. The year before, 855. His OPS pluses in there were 125 and 113. So solid player, but he's kind of fallen off since then and been inconsistent. The on-base percentage has still been pretty good, but nothing that you're super excited about. So they swapped him to Halifax, and I actually think this is a good move for both teams. Just they moving a player that wasn't doing well, that was a clubhouse problem for Halifax, who needed to clear house, and getting something back that could be useful that's still young. They're not real exciting players. I called both players kind of C+, B- players. And then they kind of, B-ish type grade for Halifax. And I gave Seattle a little bit better grade for the organizational standpoint, just because they got something for essentially nothing, because they just don't, they don't need Gonzalez, and it's always a good move to get rid of your position redundancy for an upgrade, and they needed pitching badly. So this is, again, and I think Rec commented us on the forums a little while how we don't see Seattle make in-season moves for pitching very often. So great move for them. Moving on. Couple more reasonable deals to get to, and then we'll kind of get to the lightning round where we talk about all the little minor stuff and maybe wrap it up after that. You got Edmonton and Long Beach, and this is a trade in which Edmonton got relief pitchers Eddie DeGrief and Bailey Adahow. Long Beach got Elmer Mold. Long Beach essentially needed a first baseman. Elmer Mold is a known quantity. He's not the greatest first baseman in the world. He's probably the guy that if you have on your team and you're a big-time contender, you're always wondering, gosh, could I have somebody a little bit better? But at times, he plays very, very well. And even when he's not playing well, he doesn't stink. He's acceptable at that position. He's got, over the last 5 seasons, he's got OPS pluses that are 134, 101, 114, 143. This year he's total for 114. So he's a solid, good player although he's old, making only $4 million. He's an expiring contract this year. You could expect him to have kind of an on-base percentage in the 320 to 330 range, hit you 20 to 30 home runs, get you 20 to 30 doubles. Just a solid player, and they had nothing at first base. They did have a bunch of relievers, and so they sent 2 of them back to Edmonton for this. Eddie DeGrief is a 29-year-old, kind of a failed starter prospect, frankly, whose curveball just never developed. And he's been an okay reliever throughout his career, really. I mean, career ERA of 4.52. It doesn't make much, only makes only 150K. He's kind of a warm body, really, out there in the pen. Much better against righties than lefties, and that's probably a huge part of his problem. He's a little bit home run prone as well, and that's limited him. Bailey Addahow, on the other hand, is a very nice relief pickup. I don't think he's been quite the player we would expect him to since coming over from the EBA, but he has been, I think let me find him really quickly here, actually in OTP, so there's one particular thing I wanted to look at, and now I can't. Is he hurt? It's like everybody, yeah, he's hurt. Everybody that got traded got hurt. He was, this big, fancy pitcher, and I think over in the EBA, when he initially came over, he had a little bit of a first rough season last year with a 4.69 ERA. It was a little bit disappointing, but actually was pitching quite well for Long Beach this year. And even with that ERA, his FIP was only 4.03, so it wasn't that bad. It was, he doesn't have the best motion. We thought maybe giving up the long ball would be a bit of a problem for him, and it was last year. He gave up 1.6 home runs per 9 innings pitched, which really isn't what you want out of actually, no, I'm wrong. I'm looking at the wrong year. That's what I thought. It actually hasn't been a problem for him. He didn't give up much of the long ball last year. And he's doing it a little bit worse rate this year, but since moving to Edmonton has cut down on that and been a really good reliever for him. The exciting thing about Addahow is that even if he's just a middle reliever, and that looks like that's kind of his floor, frankly, and his ceiling is kind of a good setup role, maybe a closer in a crazy year, but probably just a very solid middle reliever. He has a terrific contract. He's making 1.2, 1.4, 1.5, and 1.6 million over the next few years, and I think almost any of us would be happy to have a known quality, solid reliever at those prices. I thought this was a good trade for both teams. Long Beach had a relief pitching surplus. They utilized that to fill a hole. Organizationally, I gave them an A. I gave them kind of a C minus, B plus on the talent, because that's what Mold is. Edmonton, I gave kind of a B minus on the talent. That might be a little bit high I tend to downgrade a little bit for relievers, but I also gave them an A, because while they're not super competitive, they traded Mold, who is of really no value to them while they're in this kind of establishing themselves hoarding prospect state, for Addahow, who again may not help them win, but he's marketable. You can probably get something for him in the future, and if they move him again, that's going to be a strong move for them. So I thought this was a good move for both teams. The next one to talk about would be the Atlantic City Long Beach deal, which should be the next one on the list here. Well, no, because we're going to skip the Charm City Louisville one. We'll get back to that. But Atlantic City Long Beach, and this is the deal that sent Jesus Paez and Alfredo Chavez to Long Beach for Ignacio Leyva, John Glenn, and Afawales Aravu. God, this makes me feel terrible, but where's he from? He's from a country code that I don't even know the abbreviation for, so that's the reason. Oh, Never mind. Maybe that's the country code for Togo. I don't know if there are any other Togolese players in Brewster, but he might be the only one. Anyway, this is kind of there's a lot of players in this deal, but very few of them actually matter. Long Beach had a bunch of pitchers get hurt, and they picked up Jesus Paz, who a few years back looked like a decent mid to back of the rotation starter. He's lumped, maybe even a little early in his career, frankly, to the point where he's not really a starting pitching option anymore. And he's one of those weird lumpers too, because he hasn't lost velocity, but he lost stuff and he lost movement. And in doing so, went from somebody who was kind of a mid-threes ERA guy to somebody who pushes 5 a lot of the time. And at that, he's fairly expensive. He's got an expiring contract, but for what he is, he's making $9 million. But Long Beach didn't care. They had so many injuries, they needed a warm body. And then they also picked up, and part of this is what allowed them to make the other move, giving up relief pitching. They also picked up Alfredo Chavez, who has been a very good reliever. He was struggling quite a bit to start this year in Atlantic City, and makes about $6 million a year, and will be doing that for a couple more years, which makes him kind of pricey, and he was not playing well for them. So I'm sure that's part of their motivation in making the move. But this is the only year he's been like that, and it was a relatively small sample size. And while we usually don't talk about what's happened afterwards, he's pitched quite well in Long Beach, and that's something that I think wasn't a big gamble them to make. He's 29 years old. He's got a few more years on his contract, but it takes him through 32 years old. So it's not that he's going to be, it doesn't have a long enough contract that you got to worry about his age. He's got a career FIP minus of 88, so that's nice and solid. So Long Beach picks up a warm body for the starting rotation and a good reliever. Atlantic City got Ignacio Leyva as a catcher. He basically looks like a backup / righty platoon. He's young, he's cheap, he's got 2 arms left, but he's nothing tremendously special. John Glenn's a 24-year-old catching prospect. He's a little underdeveloped for 24. He has a little power to go and a couple points of contact. He tops out at 7'6", 4'6", 7", but he's got a great arm behind the plate, and he handles pitchers pretty well. He could develop into a solid starting catcher that you're more happy with for his defensive presence, but not killing you offensively. He'll never be a masher, but he could be a good player should he develop all the way. Or maybe we're overusing the word good, but at catcher he could be acceptable. Aruvu is he's 17, so that's the big thing on him. And you never know what these guys are going to turn into. He has 3 pitches. He looks like maybe a closer prospect. At the time of the trade, he was 9.76 for his potentials, throwing 94 or so miles an hour, 94, 95 miles an hour. So that's the guy with real closer potential should he get some arm strength. He's got a curveball and a cutter and a screwball, which probably will never get to be much of anything. But he had the pitch makeup to turn into a decent setup closer type prospect. But at 7, and he's fairly well developed at 6'5" for a 17-year-old. But you never know with these young guys. Overall, I thought this is a decent, good move for both teams. With Long Beach, with Basaglia on the team, and I think he's 26 or 27 now, doesn't need John Glenn. He'll be mired. They don't need Leyva either. Atlantic City doesn't have any use for Paz anymore. Chavez was not playing well for him. So essentially, Atlantic City flipped a couple blocked players and an okay pitching prospect, but young, to fill a need in a reliever and a hole in the starting rotation. Atlantic City, does the exact opposite. They flip 2 players who either aren't performing or they don't need to get a little depth and to get a couple more prospects in the minors. So I gave Long Beach talent. I gave them a B+. Organizationally, I gave them a B-. Atlantic City, B- for the talent. Organizationally, A-. I just think this was a good, solid move for both teams. That gets us through all of the kind of reasonably sized deals. There's a few left to touch on that we'll get through pretty rapid, that we'll just kind of fire through rapidly here. And the first one will be Louisville, Hawaii. This is the trade that sent Enrico Franco, Julio Castillo, and Carlos Rivera to Louisville for Ron Kulo. Essentially, most of these players just don't matter at all. The genius has a thing for acquiring his old guys. Clulo at one point had been a successful reliever, even though he has kind of lower control and motion, but he'd been a successful reliever for both Hawaii and Louisville. Last year he lumped, and he wasn't really much good after that. He just doesn't have the motion anymore. Louisville essentially took a flyer on him, and to do so they moved Enrico Franco, is a 28-year-old seldomly used reliever, who the way his ratings look at best would be a righty specialist. Although, interestingly, in the small amount he's pitched so far in his career, he's been okay, but it's a small sample size, and from a pure talent standpoint, he's not an impact maker. They also traded Julio Castillo, who had a career year last year before the lump monster destroyed him this year, and frankly, he outplayed his ratings last year. He's a $2 million salary dump, essentially. And then Carlos Rivera is a 26-year-old 7.58 pitcher. He's minor league filler. The grades on this really aren't that exciting, so we'll skip them. The next kind of rapid-fire one is Charm City, Louisville. And let me see if I can find that one, because I can't even read the name I wrote down anymore. That's how impressive I was with this. Louisville gets 22-year-old Eric Richter. He's 8.58 he's an 8.58 righty. He's got a negative lefty split. Frankly, at 22, he's unlikely to develop the motion to where he's ever going to work in the Brewster. And then Charm City got 22-year-old catcher Danny Sanchez. Sanchez is a backup catcher, and that's really what was going on here. Is they needed a backup catcher, and they sent something to Louisville for a backup catcher. Sanchez may be more of a quad A guy, but he can back you up in a pinch. Although he doesn't really handle pitchers that well, he's got a gun for an arm. They also got Charles Van Ez from Louisville. He's a 27-year-old righty who just doesn't have the stuff or the motion to succeed in the Brewster. He's got okay control, but at 6.68 with a negative lefty split, he's just a AAA pitcher. And again, grades are not that exciting here. The last kind of rapid wire one is one of my trades. I sent Benjamin O'Rourke to Louisville. I had a horrible catching situation last year. I signed a couple guys that, while not a ton better, are at least probably major league bats. Poor ones, but major league bats for Benjamin O'Rourke, who has no business starting in the Brewster anymore. And although he is phenomenal behind the plate and players absolutely love him, he would cost me $1 million this year, and I just didn't want to pay $1 million to a guy who wasn't going to get any plate appearances. Another thing the genius likes to do is acquire every amazing defender or multi-position defender in the league. And it seems to work out for him. He's doing great this year, and O'Rourke's actually playing reasonably well as a backup catcher for him. He's actually going to finish with like 1 or 1.5 WAR, which for a guy not playing too many games is pretty darn solid. And again, there'll be grades on these in the notes. So again, there'll be some notes attached to this that'll tell us if you wanted to look for a specific trade, what time it was, and then I'll start getting that Excel spreadsheet up for keeping track of grades going forward. I hope this wasn't too boring. I think that we didn't have a workout time. Tyler and I were going to kind of trade back and forth and take turns, but he only had about 40 minutes today because he had to help somebody move. So I really appreciate him showing up and squeezing in what he could in the time that he had. And then you had to listen to me drone on forever about stuff after he left and for the boring half of the show. Anyway, I hope this was interesting. I'm going to try to keep this going if it's well received and seems to be something worth doing. More guests is always good. I think we could handle 2 guest commentators and get a little bit more talk going. But that's it for this edition. And like I said, I had fun making it. I wished it was a lot more fun when I had the co-host still here and Tyler was talking to me. But thanks for listening. And as always, the grades are really just pulled out of my ass. And a lot of these trades work out completely different from what we thought, but if we don't talk about them, if we don't talk about them, it's just more boring, I guess. I don't really know how to stop here, so just going to stop. Thanks for listening.